Picture this. You're standing in a dusty courtyard in Thebes, around 1350 BCE. The sun is a white-hot disk, sand stings your face, and a man named Thoth is screaming at the sky. He has gone completely blind. For 30 years he worked in the embalming workshops of Amun. He never abandoned his post. He never gave the priests a reason to complain. And still the darkness came. Now strangers have to lead him by the hand, so he sleeps in the temple courtyard night after night, begging the god to send him medicine, or at least a dream that tells him where to find it. That is one real Egyptian's response to blindness. But it was far from the only one. Today we're going to walk through exactly what ancient Egyptians did when someone's sight failed. The medicines they mixed, the gods they begged, the jobs they still expected the blind to perform, and the surprisingly practical things that sometimes actually worked. By the end you'll understand why a pig's eyes, a cow's liver, and a very specific magic spell all ended up in the same medical papyrus, and why the blind were never simply discarded. Eye disease was everywhere in ancient Egypt. The climate was a perfect storm, endless dust storms, glare off the river and desert, clouds of flies, and a disease we now know as trachoma that quietly scarred the eyelids of half the population. Builders inhaled stone dust, farmers got sand in their eyes every day. Soldiers came home with injuries, children played in the same filthy water that carried infection. Blindness was not rare, it was a fact of life, and the Egyptians did not pretend otherwise. Their medical texts, especially the Great Ebers Papyrus, written around 1550 BCE, devote page after page to the eyes. There are recipes for inflammation, for watering eyes, for whitenings, for something they called a small ball in the eye, and for outright blindness. Some of those recipes sound like pure magic. Others were accidentally brilliant. Take night blindness, the inability to see in dim light. The Ebers Papyrus and the London Medical Papyrus both prescribe the same thing. Take the liver of an ox or a cow, roast it or smoke it over straw, squeeze out the juice, and put that juice directly into the patient's eyes. Today we know liver is packed with vitamin A. Night blindness is often caused by vitamin A deficiency. The Egyptians had no idea what a vitamin was, but they had noticed that this treatment worked. Really excellent, the papyrus says, and it was. Then there is the more extreme recipe for full blindness. Take 2 eyes of a pig. Remove the water from them. Mix with true collyrium, red lead, and wild honey. Grind everything into a fine powder. Inject the powder into the patient's ear. While you mix it, recite this spell twice. I have brought this thing and put it in its place. The crocodile is weak and powerless. Why the ear? Because the Egyptians believed the eyes and ears were connected by an internal channel. Why a pig's eyes? Because a pig sees almost as well as a human, they thought, so the sight could be transferred by sympathetic magic. Why the crocodile? Because the god Seth, often shown as a crocodile, was the chaos force that caused disease. The spell was meant to break his power. Did it restore sight? Almost certainly not. But the combination of ritual and medicine tells you everything about how Egyptians understood the body. The physical and the divine were never separate. They also used ointments of myrrh and sour milk, poultices of powdered onions, honey mixed with minerals, and countless other salves. Some were soothing, some were painful. A few may have had mild antiseptic effects. Most were hopeful gestures against a problem they could not truly cure. When medicine failed, people turned to the gods. Horus himself had been blinded, or partially blinded, by Seth in the great mythic battle. Thoth restored his eyes. That story gave every blind Egyptian a divine precedent. If the god of the sky could lose his sight and regain it, then maybe a mortal could too. People left stelae at temples, begging Ptah or Amun or Thoth for mercy. One man named Neferubu admitted he had sworn a false oath by Ptah and been punished with darkness in the daytime. He asked the god to let him see again. Others slept in temple courtyards, hoping for a healing dream, exactly as Thoth did. Sometimes the dream came, sometimes it didn't. The record is silent on how often the gods answered, but here is the part most people miss. Blindness did not automatically mean the end of a useful life. In tomb paintings you keep seeing the same figure, a harpist, eyes closed or covered, fingers flying across the strings. Blind musicians were common enough that the closed-eye harpist became almost a visual cliché. They performed in temples, in elite households, at funerals. Their voices and their music were valued. Other blind people worked as doorkeepers, herdsmen, land measurers, or craftsmen. Wisdom texts instructed ordinary Egyptians not to mock the blind, not to tease a dwarf, not to make life harder for the lame. The instruction of Amenemope is very clear on this point. These people were creations of the gods. Treat them with respect. There is even evidence that some temples and royal households provided support or employment for the disabled. The blind were not invisible. They were part of the social fabric, sometimes pitied, sometimes employed, sometimes simply accepted. Of course, life was still hard. A peasant farmer who went blind faced a steeper climb than a temple musician. Poverty and disability together were brutal. Begging existed, but the culture did not treat blindness as a mark of shame or divine rejection in the way some later societies would. So what did an ancient Egyptian actually do when the darkness came? First, they went to a physician or a priest-physician and tried the known remedies: liver juice if it was night blindness, pig eye paste and spells if it was total, ointments and bandages for everything in between. Second, they prayed. They left offerings. They slept in sacred places. They told the story of Horus and hoped for the same ending. Third, if the light never returned, they found a new place in the world. Often that place involved music. Sometimes it involved quieter work that did not require eyes. Almost always it involved family or temple or community support of some kind. The treatments were a mixture of real observation and pure magic. The social response was more humane than we might expect. And the medical papyri still sit in museums, full of recipes that make modern doctors both wince and nod in reluctant respect. 3,000 years later, we can diagnose trachoma, prescribe vitamin A, and perform cataract surgery with lasers. We no longer inject pig eyes into ears. But the fundamental human reaction has not changed much. When the world goes dark, we still reach for medicine, for meaning, and for a place where we can still be useful. The Egyptians reached for all three, and in their own imperfect way, they found them.